We're continuing our study in the book of Deuteronomy, and we're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 5 this morning. Continuing on, Moses is rehearsing past history of Israel as well as the commandments that God had given them to this new generation as he's preparing them to go over in to take the promised land. So we want to just remember that all of this is a reminder unto the children of Israel about God and how God had blessed them. And of course, when they disobeyed God, about how he had cursed them. So this young generation needed to be taught. We're going to see in Deuteronomy chapter 6, it's a prayer. We don't realize it's a Jewish prayer. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, beginning at verse 4, when it talks about teach the children in the morning in the highways and byways and things of that nature so they don't forget the Lord. So this is what this is about. We know today that we have to be steadily reminded about the things of God. Hebrews chapter 2 says, lest we let it slip. So these things can slip. Also we know that Peter reminded the brethren there in chapter 2, chapter 3, that he wrote unto them to stir up their minds, okay? To stir up your pure minds unto what? Remembrance. Because, see, it's easy to let things slip, especially when you have so many influences from the left, from the right, side, up, down, all around. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, we're going to get into the seven main nations that God wanted Israel to destroy. And what's real interesting about those seven nations, they represent different aspects of teachings that God did not want Israel to engage in. And it's kind of interesting. I never thought about it from that standpoint till I come across this study. Anyway, so Moses has called them together, and it says that here in chapter 5, he's pulled them back together again now to hear those statutes, okay? So Deuteronomy chapter 5 is going to get back into the Ten Commandments that was given. First, he's going to talk about the verbal giving there along and about Exodus chapter 19, Exodus chapter 20. Later on, you get into where he went up and got the tables of stone about Exodus chapter 32. Then about Exodus chapter 34, he has to go back again because when he came down the mountain with them, what did he do? He broke them. Why? Because of what he saw the children of Israel engaged in. So there's a whole lot to this that probably won't get through Deuteronomy chapter 5 today. Okay? Gonna try, but won't promise. So the conversation goes like this. The commemoration of the covenant at Mount Sinai on Mount Horeb, which is one and the same, the Ten Commandments, and the people request Moses to receive the law from God and not let God, and we're going to go back to that along about Exodus 19 and 20 and read some of that to refresh ourselves. If you remember, here at Sinai, Moses had went up and down that mountain about 8 times. And remember, we counted it, and we had the handout showing each time he went up and down the mountain, okay? Moses wore me out, Greg, going up and down that mountain, okay? I had to go home and rest after I realized how many trips he was going up and down that mountain. But anyway, the people, once they heard the voice of God speak to them verbally, the Ten Commandments, they were like, whoa, we don't want that. And we'll turn over in just a minute when we get kind of that part, and we'll refresh ourselves on that. Deuteronomy 5 is not just about rules, it's about a loving relationship between God and his people. The Ten Commandments aren't merely obligations, but are guiding principles for a flourishing society. As we seek to live by these timeless truths, we are reminded that a heart committed to God's way is a true path to prosperity and blessings. And that's the whole thing about this. Now, let me make a side note on some of this. Some of this wording and structure that I've done is really pertaining to the old Bible. Let us keep in mind that the Ten Commandments today, 9 of the 10 are carried over in principle in the New Testament. There's one that's not carried over, and that's to keep the Sabbath. We're no longer the Jewish people and we are no longer bound, if you will, by the Old Testament, okay? Not the Old Testament, I'm sorry, the old law, okay? But there are principles and things in the Old Testament that's just as important today as they were yesterday, okay? Those are good moral teachings that the Ten Commandments give. And as I said, 9 of the 10, except for the worship, is carried over into the New Testament. So kind of want you to be cognizant of that. This study is really geared more around what's here than what's over here. But I'll try to keep that in mind and kind of remind everybody about what's happening here, okay? Daniel, we'll start with you. Verses 1 through 5, Deuteronomy chapter 5, the covenant's context, okay?
Moses called all Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your hearing today, that you may learn them and be careful to observe them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, those who are here today, all of us who are alive. The Lord talked with you face to face on the mountain from the midst of the fire. I stood between the Lord and you at that time, to declare to you the word of the Lord, for you were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up the mountain, he said.
Okay, so here we kind of have the setting and context, and I know I cut that off right there for a reason. Moses has called them together. One of the things you notice kind of clears up the maybe confusion in the religious world when you're studying other material and stuff. Who did God make that covenant with? Us. Who is the us there? The Lord made not this covenant with our fathers. He prophesied in it, and he worked with the fathers. He worked with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob to bring this about, okay? They were under a covenant of promise that all this was to come, that God would have a great nation, and in his seed, talking about the coming of Jesus Christ, would be blessed. So, notice what he says here, that this covenant was made with us, even us who are all of us here alive today. So, if you want to put that in context, who's Moses talking to? The children of Israel. Who's the us there? Not us today. It's talking about them back then, okay? What covenant has God made with us today? The law of grace and truth. How did it come? By Jesus Christ, okay? So even Moses recognized the fact that that covenant that God was going to give them, that was given to them at Horeb, the old law was for who? For them, okay? Did he recognize it with any other nations? No, okay? So it was given to the Jewish people. One of the questions that come out of that is, well, why did he select them? He selected them to bring Jesus Christ into the world, to prepare people for the coming of Jesus Christ, okay? And you're going to see that he was really jealous of these people, because you're going to get into Deuteronomy 6 and 7 and so forth. God did not want them intermingling with the nations around about them. He did not want them to marry into them, to commune with them, or anything like that. He wanted God's people to stay distinct, okay? You can kind of see a principle of that today, that God wants his church, spiritual Israel, to be what? Distinct. When you're not distinct and you're not separate, what do you look like? Everybody else. Okay? So, you lose your distinction, don't you? And we're going to see this is why when we had put the maps up in Deuteronomy chapter 7, and what he told them about getting rid of those 7 main nations. And those 7 main nations represent sin that God condemns. But that's another story. Okay. Any of you brethren have any comments or thoughts on that? Now, what Moses is talking about here, and I'll go ahead and kind of get into this. I was going to get into it in another place, but I'll jump on down here to verse 22 of Deuteronomy chapter 5, because he's rehearsing now the events at Horeb. Anyway, he tells them about the Ten Commandments and things like that. These words the Lord spake unto all your assembly in the mount out of the midst of the fire and of the cloud and of thick darkness with great voice, and he added no more. And he wrote them down in 2 tables of stone and delivered them unto me. So there's 2 parts to this, okay? There's Exodus 20, 19 through 22. This is where the voice was heard. This is what he's talking about to start with. Then a pause, and later on, he's going to go get the 10 Commandments. God is going to specifically tell him it's time, long about Exodus chapter 24, it's time for me to give you this written. Okay, so let's take this one step at a time. Exodus chapter 20, let's turn back over there. Exodus chapter 20. Here, if you look back into some of these prior chapters, you're going to find Moses going up the mountain meeting God, coming down the mountain meeting God, going up the mountain meeting God. One time, he took Nadab and Abihu, remember them? The 70 elders, and Joshua with him halfway up the mountain. And they saw where the presence of God was. Did they see God? No, but they saw where the presence of God was. And Moses continued on up the mountain, okay? To meet with God. So we talked about all of that in great detail when we covered that in Exodus chapter 19 and 19. But when we get over here in Exodus Exodus 19 verse 20, notice what God said to Moses. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and the Lord called Moses up to the mount. Here he goes up again. Up to the mount, and Moses went up. Then the Lord tells Moses, after he discusses with him, you go back down, okay? And so verse 25 says, and Moses went down and spake unto the people. So what happened here in verse 20? Well, we're going to find that God is going to speak to the people. And notice what they say here after God speaks to them, and you're going to see the 10 Commandments given, okay? And I'm just doing an overview because we studied this in great detail, okay? And the people, notice this in verse 18, and all the people saw the thunderings and the lightning and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. Well, it was quite a sight, wasn't it? They saw what? The thunderings and the smoke. Now, who actually saw this? Remember, Deuteronomy is a rehearsal to the new generation. This is the old generation that directly saw this, okay? These people had a visual, actual sighting of God being on that mountain and him speaking to him. And notice what they said as they were removed back from the mountain. Now, you can kind of just see them gathered there. Moses is in between them. He's up on the mountain. God's up here. God's speaking. And you can just see the people kind of stepping back. They know there's a power here, right? You can kind of just see them removing themselves, can't you? Notice when they talked to Moses what they said in verse 19. And they said unto Moses, speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. Okay? And so we find the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said unto Moses, Thus shalt say unto the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven, and you go on and so forth. So they saw, and this is what Moses is rehearsing here in Deuteronomy chapter 5, okay, where God actually spoke to them, and they were like in fear. Don't let God speak to us directly. Speak to us through Moses, okay? And so God is going to speak to them how? Through Moses, right? Okay? So, and we turn on over, as we get into this, let me turn back to Deuteronomy chapter 5 for just a second. And so we find out Exodus 24 and verse 12. Notice this. God's going to be giving them some things. You know, there's going to be some events go on between the time of this happening and the time that Moses is told to go up into the mountain. And notice what it says here. Verse 12, tables of stone. Moses is called up to the mount to receive what? The Ten Commandments in written form. Verse 12. And there's more to it than this, okay? This is an overview. We studied this in detail. Probably took a lot of time with it, if I remember correctly. And the Lord said unto Moses, come up to me into the mount and be there. And I will give thee tables of stone, a law and commandment which I have written that thou mayest teach them. Okay? So, what did God tell Moses? Now it's time to come up to the mount so you'll have it in written detail. Well, what happened? Well, when you turn over to Exodus chapter 34, where am I at? Verse 34. Earlier, what had Moses done? Well, you know, he came down the mountain, and what did he see? Israel went off into apostasy and made a golden calf, right? He broke the 2 tables of stone, didn't he? Okay? So, let's look over here in verse 34. This is the second tablet of stone, okay? And the Lord said unto Moses, hew 2 tablets of stone like unto the first. Okay? And I shall write upon these tablets that were in the first tablets which you broke. Okay, so God's going to give him another set, right? Hey, Reed, they didn't have a copy machine back then. Hard to copy stone, you know. So anyway. And he tells Moses to be ready in the morning and come up in the morning unto Mount Sinai and present thyself to me in the top of the mount. Okay? But he also warned Moses while he's giving him the 10 Commandments, and this is where part of Deuteronomy chapter 5 picks up. Notice what he says here. Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, whither thou goest, lest it be a snare in the midst of thee. But ye shall destroy their altars, break down their groves, and shall not worship no other God. So all this is a part of what he's rehearsing here in Deuteronomy chapter 5 and forward. Remember we said when the opening remarks in Deuteronomy chapter 1, there's about 4 or 5 discourses Moses is going to give here, and it's to these people to remind them of those things that's happened. So, any of you brothers got any questions or comments on that? I know I blew through that kind of fast, but we got a lot of time that we spent on that when all that was happening. So, with that, that's what he's talking about here, like in verse 5. I stood between you at that time and the Lord. Okay? He stood between them. He's going to talk some more about that too, okay? So Moses has been acting as an intercessor for quite some time with these people as he led them out of Egypt, hadn't he? Okay? Moses calls the Israelites and reminds them of the covenant they made with God at Mount Horeb. He states that he stands between God and them to convey his word, emphasizing his role as an intermediary. Okay? Already we've seen on 3 or 4 major occasions, what did God want to do with them people? Destroy them. Didn't see that over and over, hadn't he? What saved them? Moses. He was the intercessor with them. So. Verses 6 through 21 is the 10 Commandments that's re-illustrated. Read, to tell you what, let's do on that. If you'll read about half of it, 6 through 21, so that'll be about 7 verses, and we'll just kind of blow through that because we all know what the 10 Commandments are, okay?
He said, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other God before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, and on the 3rd and the 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to the thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male servant, or your female servant, or your ox, or your donkey, or any of your cattle, or your sojourner who stays with you, so that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you.
You keep going.
You know,
Yeah.
You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day.
Okay, just stop right there. Okay, that'll be good. Okay, so here we have him rehearsing the commandments that God gave. One of the things you notice here, sometimes it gets into a conversation about what's going on when he says about if you apostatize or you leave your Lord your God, then the iniquities is going to be visited upon your children, even to the third and fourth generations. What he's saying, there's great consequences when one departs from the Lord. How many times and we'll just use the church as an example today, there have been faithful members of the church, something happens, they leave, they're gone off, and what happens to the children? They're gone too, ain't they? And they don't come back, do they? And that goes on and on and on, doesn't it? Until somebody breaks the cycle. And that's what he's talking about. Your actions have grave consequences on future generations is the whole point. Okay? Is the whole point. Your actions have consequences on future generations. Now, I'm going to kind of step out of this for a minute because it kind of maybe drives a point home from a worldly standpoint in one of the old country songs that Hank Williams Jr., and I'm not here to plug him for anything, okay? What was one of those songs? I'm keeping on the family tradition. But if you don't watch it, your actions will allow that to continue on. You'll set up a family tradition, won't you? It's repeated over and over and over again. So we need to think about that our actions have far-reaching. Just think about that now. This is talking about far-reaching consequences. It's not just talking about a localized consequence, okay? Your actions have a far-reaching consequences on future generations. It's not even born yet, okay? So it's a powerful lesson to think about. And, you know, when God told him this, you know, he could see down the road what was going to happen. The actions and consequences that took place when they said, let Jesus' blood be on us and our children, is still going on. We were looking at something the other night, Peggy and I, they had this thing on television about where they had, he was a war criminal from World War II, they had tracked him down. The use of DNA, and the DNA was extracted from paper on a postcard he had sent back some other time. And it showed some of the snippets of what went on over there. He was involved in a lot of the killing of the Jews, and it showed some of that. And me and Peggy was talking about that, and I said, you know, that just shows you. This is still going on. They are not repentant. All of this because of stubbornness and hardness of heart. Moses told them that in Deuteronomy 28, didn't he? He's warning them of that now. Your stubbornness and your hard-headedness is going to catch up with you. And your future generations are going to pay. And it's still that way. They're unrepentant and not acknowledging that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. When do you learn, Daniel? You know? So, you know, and it's something to think about. And we kind of maybe end this a little deeper than I wanted to go, but it's a lot of lessons here that Moses is trying to teach that younger generation. Don't go in the direction of your forefathers, okay? There's dire consequences, okay, for that. But anyway, any of your brethren got any comment on that? Jeff, would you pick up at verse 16 and stop at verse 21, please?
Honor your father and your mother, and the Lord God, as the Lord God commanded you, that your days may be long, and that you may go well with you in the land of the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, and you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. And you shall not desire your neighbor's house, field, or his male servant, his female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's.
Okay, so here we have it, and we're all familiar with this, and I'll just do a brief comment. I think we all understand, a lot of times when you're talking with people, they'll talk about, well, you know, God allowed him to kill all these people, and his commandment says, thou shalt not kill. Jeff's translation is correct. When you go back and look at that word, I don't know why the KJV writers chose thou shalt not kill, but actually the word is thou shalt not murder, okay? God has always required the blood of guilty men. Let's go back and look. Even today, the courts and things that we live under are justified by God to carry out what? The death penalty. Because society has to have rules and laws and control. God realized that everybody wasn't going to be a Christian. He realized everybody wasn't going to follow his word, his pattern, his plan. He knew that. But he knew you had to have control too, okay? And these 7 nations that he's primarily going to have Israel basically wipe out, or they were supposed to wipe out, Jeff. Restricted all these traits that God didn't want. He didn't want them to pick up those habits. So God has all, even today, does God require the blood of wicked men? It's the way things are laid out. You got to have control. You got to have order and decency for society to flourish, okay? And God recognized that. So anyway, where am I at? I probably ain't going through it. The 10 Commandments, as we said, were reiterated to them. And, you know, we read through that. I'm not going to go back through them. We all know the 10 Commandments and what they are, okay? Israel's fear and Moses' role. Greg, verses 23 through 27. I might get through with this.
These words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain from the midst of the fire, of the clouds, and of the thick gloom with a great voice, and he added no more. He wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. And when you heard the voice from the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders. You said, behold, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice from the midst of the fire. We have seen today that God speaks with man as he lives. Now, then, why would we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer, then we will die. For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living God speaking from the midst of the fire, as we have and live? Go here and hear all that the Lord our God says, and speak to us all that the Lord our God speaks to you, and we will hear and do it.
Okay, so several things in it. Notice what he said. These were the words that God spoke to you or your fathers in this particular place out of the mount. Okay? So that was audible. Notice what else he says. That when he saw that, the mountain did burn with fire, that you came near unto me, even all the heads of your tribe. So this is when they wanted Moses, to be the intercessor, between God and them, okay? One of the things that I was going to take a quick look at is, notice what it says here in verse 22. How did he write it? And he added no more. What do we hear that thought echoed again? How about Revelation chapter 22, about adding unto and taking away? Right now there was no taking away because they were just getting it added to them, wasn't it? But eventually what were they going to do? We're going to get into that in Deuteronomy 28, okay? They're going to take away. So has the God's thought about his word always been not add unto or take away? What about the thought that our God in the New Testament is a consuming fire? Is that a foreign thought? No. Notice what it says here. Now therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us, if we hear the voice of the Lord our God, then we shall, if the Lord our God any more, then we shall die. What did he say here? God's what kind of fire? Consuming fire. Has that changed? You're going to find there's a lot of thoughts. You're going to find that as we get into this, some of the statements that Jesus made actually come from Deuteronomy and Moses' speech within all this. Remember what Jesus said after he'd been tempted 40 days and 40 nights, and he told the devil what? You should not live by bread alone, but every word that comes out of the voice of the mouth of God. Guess where that came from? You're going to see this in a few chapters. Okay? So none of this is a foreign concept, okay, about these things. Any of you brethren got any comments or anything you want to make on that? One of the things you have to remember about all this, and we talked about that when we went through the book of Genesis, there's a lot of things within the commandments of God that were set in order in the beginning. They're still in force today. None of that's changed. What changed? The law. Okay? The sacrificing, the structure and thought of the Ten Commandments, especially the one about keeping the Sabbath, that's gone. Okay? But the thought pattern on God's spiritual and moral codes, you don't see where it's really ever changed. Okay? Anyway, that's another lesson, another story. Okay. We went through that. Walking 28 through 33. Deuteronomy 5.
And the Lord heard the voice of your words when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people which they have spoken to you. They are right in all that they have spoken. Oh, that they had such heart in them that they would fear me and always keep all my commandments, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. Go and say to them, return to your tents. But as for you, stand here by me. I will speak to you all the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments, which you shall teach them, that they may observe them in the land which I am giving them to possess. Therefore you shall be careful to do as the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. You shall walk in all the ways which the Lord your God hath commanded you, that you may live and that it may be well with you, that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess.
Okay, so here we have this thought here. Notice, and I'm going to back up just a second to verse 27. Go down here and hear all that the Lord our God shall say, and speak unto us all that the Lord our God shall speak unto thee. Who they talking to? Moses. Remember, they said, what? We want Moses to speak unto us and not God directly, okay? And notice what they said back over there in Exodus chapter 20. What did they say? We will hear. Well, Moses is reminding this younger generation that your forefathers said, we will hear and do it. Did they fulfill their word on that? No. They made a promise they didn't keep, didn't they? It's a dangerous thing. They run laps basically around the Sinai Peninsula for 40 years. That kind of remind me of the coach we had playing football and stuff and all like that, and what little bit I tried to play without being hurt, which didn't get very far. If you didn't do like the coach said and you wasn't hitting like you supposed to, 10 laps around the football field. And it'd be hot out there, Daniel. You remember all that. I know Reed does. Okay? So, was a punishment and consequences, made a promise and didn't keep it. He's warning them, don't you do like your fathers. Don't you make a promise to God, a vow to God, and not keep it. Okay? Because there's dire consequences on that. And so the Lord tells Moses to stay and let me talk with you. Verse 31, and I want you to be well-versed, Moses, at what's expected out of you to bring these people over into the promised land so they will prosper. Okay? So any of you brethren have any comments or thoughts on that? Yep, I got through with the chapter. I didn't think I was going to do it, going back over to Exodus and all like that. So a lot of these things that you're going to see Moses talk about as you go forward, we are going to briefly refer back to where all the original event actually happened with these people. So I'm going to stop right there. We have about a minute or two. And